Today's episode of This Week in Startups is brought to you by New Relic. Visit newrelic.com/twist and see why thousands of developers worldwide don't deploy without it. And by MailChimp. Manage lists with up to 2,000 subscribers and send up to 12,000 emails per month for free with MailChimp. And by Amazon Web Services. Get the resources you need to easily get started with AWS Activate, a new global program for startups, including AWS credits, training, developer support, a startup community forum, and special offers from third parties. Learn more and sign up at aws.amazon.com/activate.
Hey everybody, it's Jason Calacanis, and this is This Week in Startups. This is the show where we talk about being an entrepreneur, just crushing it, working hard to put a new idea or product into the world, a service, etc. And on today's show, Chip Conley. Now, back in the 80s, he shook up the hotel industry by starting the Phoenix in San Francisco, a hotel I actually stayed at. It was a rock and roll hotel. It was pretty awesome. That became a chain, Joie de Vivre, and he ran that for over 20 years. He's now an author and a speaker, and he's written a lot of books, including Emotional Equations, and he's working with Airbnb, which is just a crushing it business out of Y Combinator that's worth billions of dollars. And we did this interview at DFJ's CEO Summit in Half Moon Bay, just below San Francisco, and it was a really great interview. It started out a little bit tentative, but it really gets good about halfway through, so stick with it, and please enjoy and give me your feedback. I'm at Jason on Twitter.
That's what it's all about, man. They said money is the root of all evil. What? Funny how it feeds my people. Yeah. We ain't gonna live like equals until we get the money, spend the money, and defeat you. Yeah. Money is the root of all evil. What? Funny how it feeds my people. Yeah. We ain't gonna live like equals until we get the money, spend the money, and defeat you.
Well, listen, thanks to the guys at DFJ and everybody there for asking me to come tonight and interview Chip. I think having listened to your books on Audible and your TED Talk is fantastic. I think it'll be a great discussion. And what a great event. I was lucky enough to be on the 6th floor. I think the best part of this event is I got a list of all the business development people who are upstairs.
Yes.
I mean, I think about 7 companies got sold today. How many people sold their company? Don't sell now. No, you should probably sell now. Hey, what do you think? Is it a bubble right now? Like, I mean, we're seeing colossal valuations. Yeah. I mean, you're now working for Airbnb in some way. Speaking of colossal valuations.
Colossal valuations, Airbnb. I am the head of global hospitality for Airbnb, and I am Brian Chesky's mentor, which he asked me to be. So in terms of colossal valuations, it's definitely different than the last time. And I know
What's different?
Well, during the dot-com boom, there were not nearly as many companies that actually were making money.
Right.
Airbnb, while it's all private and I can't tell you all the details, it's a company that doesn't really need any funding because it's doing that well.
Making that much money.
And it's a private company and it doesn't need funding. And it has great investors, but at this point it doesn't need funding. So that tells you how it's doing. There are a lot of companies like that in San Francisco today, and back in 2000 or 1999, 1998, 98% of those companies were not making money. So I think
huge difference.
Yeah, it's a big difference. And fundamentally, I think technology is a more fundamental part of our lives than it was back then. It was a little bit more of a novelty, and today it's how we live our lives. We're sort of stuck between Facebook and Google, and then a little Apple thrown in there, and next thing you know, that's all you do is technology.
Oh, New Relic. Powerful application performance, and it's a tool that I use myself. 50,000 customers use it as well, including folks like Nike, Warby Parker, Airbnb, Comcast, AT&T, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Lots of great people use it. What does it do? It gives you app performance, in your email box, on a phone, on your desktop. And what this means is you can see how well your website or apps are running, and your servers and the bandwidth, all the little details that you need to know as the founder, CTO, product manager of your company. And what's great about it is I get this great email every week that tells me, hey, Monday metrics for the launch ticker, 99.82% uptime, 14,000 views, page load time, et cetera. Is it going up? Is it going down? The error rate, et cetera. When I see these great emails I get from them, I'm able to take action, which means I can go talk to my CTO, my developer, product manager, my bandwidth provider, my server farm, EC2, whoever it is. I can just say, hey, listen, let's get it together here. Let's maintain a standard in our company. Let's have a high standard for performance for our users. And New Relic really helps us do that. Go to newrelic.com/twist, newrelic.com/twist, and you will get one of these awesome free t-shirts when you create an account. And creating an account is absolutely free. So go in there, create an account, and get a This Week in Startups t-shirt absolutely free. Deep, actionable data. They support Node.js now, just like Twitter uses. They're constantly innovating. The company's doing fantastic. It's super fast. It's super easy, and no credit card is required. Let's all thank at New Relic on our Twitter handles, NEWRELIC, New Relic, and go to newrelic.com/twist and get the t-shirt. What a great team, what a great product, and what a great supporter of startups everywhere. Let's get back to the program. So the books that you've written recently, a lot about the psychology of entrepreneurship. What do you think is the core issue around this new generation of entrepreneurs coming up? Some people say it's been kind of easy to be an entrepreneur this time around. When you started, extremely hard. Web 1.0, extremely hard, a little bit easier. Now it's getting, if you can't raise angel money today, your idea has to be extremely bad. Extremely bad.
Oh, you're making these people feel so good.
No, this group is obviously people who've raised from a serious venture capital firm, but it has gotten a lot easier. What do you think is missing from today's group of entrepreneurs? You talk a lot about Viktor Frankl in your books, resiliency. Maybe you could talk about that a little bit.
Here's the number one thing I can say to the entrepreneurs in the room about what it means to be a great leader is you have no fucking clue how people in your organization study you microscopically and actually take cues from you. You are the emotional thermostat for those in your organization, and whatever you do is microscopically magnified into culture. And I define company culture as what happens when the boss is not around. So culture is really important in a company, and it's defined by usually the CEO or the founder or the founders. And so why is this important? If you're a 26-year-old, which is the Airbnb team, I started my company, Joie de Vivre, when I was 26. Ironically, the Airbnb team started when they were 26. You have no idea that everything you do is being watched closely. So culture is about how you show up, and that has an enormous impact on how everybody else shows up. So to the entrepreneurs of today, yes, you have an easier ability to raise money, but raising money is only, that's the easy part actually today. The hard part is figuring out how to monetize it, and generally speaking, those in the room, you are monetizing it based upon your knowledge workers, to use a Peter Drucker phrase, shows how old I am, to basically the people in your organization who are using their brain and their heart and their soul. And so much of that comes down to emotional intelligence. When I talk with venture capitalists and private equity people, and I've been on a few boards, the number one thing I look at is what's the emotional intelligence of the collection of folks who are starting this company, because they will define the culture, and the culture will frankly define the destiny. Steve Jobs did not have great emotional intelligence. That's absolutely certain. But in his second phase, for those who worked with him, he had a lot better emotional intelligence, and later in his life he certainly did. And so I really do believe that that's the fundamental difference between someone who has a great idea, but it's sustainable, versus one that's not sustainable, is how do you create the culture and the emotional intelligence that allows it to live.
And it seems like the companies with the great culture everybody points to are the ones that have had tremendous success. So I think it's kind of easy to look at, hey, this has become tremendously successful, it's got a great culture. What if things are going poorly, which in the early days of a startup, it kind of sucks more than it's great. So before you're successful, before you have massive profits and can afford to do all these amazing things like give people unlimited vacation or other nonsense, like how do you deal with culture in times of just extremely depressing,
That's when it's most valuable.
Yeah. Well, how,
I mean,
how do
everybody,
you do that
people
as a
think
leader?
that like you recognize people by giving them Google-like cafeteria facilities and food and all these perks. And the truth is the number one perk Mother Teresa talked about. It's attention, giving people attention and listening. And generally speaking, founders aren't great listeners. And so being able to listen and actually hear someone, repeat back to them what you heard, have them feel like it meant something, is essential. The best companies out there, whether they're huge companies or small companies, they do two things really well. They create meaning in work and at work. The at work piece we all know about. You create meaning at work by creating a company that has a purpose that people want to get behind. Airbnb as an example. The reason I was retired. I'm in a place in my life I didn't need to go back to work, but I loved the meaning at work at Airbnb. The idea that I was a disruptive innovator 27 years ago when I started a boutique hotel company at age 26. Airbnb is a disruptive innovator today in the hospitality business. The meaning at work was there because we're basically a shared economy. We are the role model for the shared economy, and we are shifting how people think about hospitality. But the meaning in work is important. Meaning at work is how the company's purpose motivates you. The meaning in work is what you can do that's different than your competitors. Because most companies, and Brian is a good example of this, I'll speak, if Brian were sitting here right now, I'd say the same thing to him. He's phenomenally good at helping our company get aligned around our mission, our purpose, and what it's all about. And you hear that, and he's a great speaker on that. Where we need to be better, Airbnb I'm speaking about, is meaning in work. How is it that on a daily basis, that the things that you do are having an impact, and how do you know it's having an impact?
So how are you guys creating mission and like this sort of higher order to selling couch space? I mean,
well, it's not couch space. I mean,
right. So how do you do that?
It was couch space. Now it's castle space. I mean, it's a funny company. When I never knew anything about Airbnb until March, when Brian said, I want you to be my mentor. And then April, he asked me to give a speech on hospitality innovation to their 700 employees. And I thought of it as a step up from couch surfing. And then I learned a little bit more.
Doesn't he pitch it though as like, it's not really about renting couches or renting space. It's about people who didn't have the ability to travel previously being able to see places in the world they wouldn't have been able to afford to go.
Well, there's two sides to it. There's the host and the guest side. And what's funny, in a network effects business like eBay or Airbnb, if you get it right, the host is the guest and the guest is the host, the buyer is the seller is the buyer. And Airbnb has now gotten to a size with 500,000 listings in 192 countries where that's happened. But on the guest side, yes, it's affordable. And it's a localized, personalized experience. But on the host side, frankly, part of the value of this business model was it was started in the Great Recession. And there were a lot of people who couldn't pay their rent or their mortgage, and they needed to figure out a way to do it. And this was a way for a micro entrepreneur to basically stay alive. And then, we had our first product launch event last week called the Open, the Airbnb Open. And as I said last week at the speech, was people got into it because of the money reasons, and they stayed doing it because of the emotional benefit.
What impact do you think it has, though, on the traditional hotel business? Obviously, New York is fighting tooth and nail to kick Airbnb out.
Yeah.
Is this
I
really...
am Darth Vader in the hotel business these days. Yeah.
Right, but I mean, you came from the hotel business. Would you have seen it as a threat? Do you?
I didn't see it as a threat. I still own 15 hotels. So I sold... For 24 years, I was the CEO of the company I founded, grew it to 3,500 employees, second largest in the US in terms of boutique hotels. And then I sold it to a guy named John Pritzker, whose father started Hyatt. I still own a piece of the company. When in March, Brian reached out to me and said, I want you to mentor me. We're a technology company that is design focused and we want to become a hospitality company. I just thought, okay, well, they probably have 50 employees and maybe 10,000 hosts around the world. So I had no clue. It was as big as it is. In 2016, we will surpass, if we are on the same trajectory that we think we're going to be on, we'll surpass Hilton in terms of the number of room nights that we actually offer to guests around the world. We'll be the largest hospitality.
But Hilton doesn't seem to be doing too poorly.
No, so your question's a good one, which is, if you look at the markets we're in, like New York and San Francisco, two major markets we're in, we are a small, we're not the disruptive innovator in the last dozen years was Expedia and Priceline. They completely changed the financial model.
How did they change the financial model?
Well, they've changed the financial model because post 9/11, people were looking for the Walmart of travel. The Walmart of travel was these new websites, these online travel.
They wanted to save money.
And they wanted to save money, and they wanted lots of choices, and those guys basically started charging a 25% commission. That was one of the models for you. If as a hotelier, you have distressed assets every day. You have perishable assets. You're making muffins in the morning. If you don't sell the muffins in the afternoon or the evening, you need to actually get rid of them quickly at night somehow. Or tomorrow, the muffins has zero value because last night's inventory doesn't do you good today. So that's what these guys did, is they really created. So that's what changed. So that's been the disruptive innovator, frankly, in the hospitality business. Airbnb is a small player overall. Where we're so big is that our growth trajectory, there are millions and millions and millions of idle mattresses around the world. And that's our opportunity. And whether they're in Paris or they're in some funky fourth world country you've never been to before, that's the opportunity. And we have created, using technology, we've been able to connect, and trust and safety, and a lot of things that have been learned the hard way at Airbnb, we've been able to create some level of trust that people will open their home and allow someone in and get paid by Airbnb, as opposed to saying when the guy's leaving or the person's leaving or the couple's leaving, hey, give me the money. That doesn't have to happen.
MailChimp. Yes, you heard the and it's time for the MailChimp ad, which means me just basically telling you I use this product. I love this product. Email is a really important part of life, especially startup life. Whether you're an individual who wants to build a list of all your constituents, your friends, your clients, etc., or you're a huge company that wants to slice and dice your list by city, by demographics, etc., it's critical that you maintain a direct relationship. Twitter, Facebook, MySpace, Friendster, YouTube, all these things, they come and go. And what all those platforms have in common is that they try to screw their users over at some point. Facebook makes you pay over and over again to reach your users, the people who liked your stuff. YouTube, same thing. You can't email your subscribers. Do not let YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, all these people get in between you and your customers. MailChimp will let you have a direct relationship with your customers. When's the last time you changed your email address? You've probably had it for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, and you're probably going to have the same email address for the rest of your life. Absolutely true. You know in your heart this is true. Therefore, if you're running a business, you want to collect emails day in and day out. But it's like low on your priority list. But let me tell you something. If you had 10,000 emails right now, how would that impact your business? Well, guess what? 10,000 emails means, hey, you know what? You're collecting 100 emails a day for just 100 days. Or you're collecting 10 emails a day for 1,000 days. If you've been running your business for a year and you haven't put up an email sign-up form for MailChimp, you are a complete idiot. I mean it. Get your act together and start collecting emails of your customers. I don't know how many times I have to tell you people this. It's fundamentally basic stuff for your business. And MailChimp allows you, with their free plan, to have up to 2,000 subscribers, and 12,000 emails can be sent per month for free. For free. Yes, you heard it right. For free. And they're constantly releasing new awesome features. They have this templating system, which you can see here, which is absolutely gorgeous. You do your layout, you do your design. It's absolutely gorgeous. The product is flawless. We use it here. We've used it here for years. There's no contract. There's no trial. The free plan is always free, and you pay as you go. team collaboration tools. It's absolutely awesome. And they'll help you decide when to send your email, what headline to do, all these great features. But you don't have to use all those ones. You can just start putting a form on your site and signing people up. And you probably notice this in your email box when you have to like click to unsubscribe from an email newsletter and you wind up on that landing page that says MailChimp all the time. And it asks you like, hey, why did you unsubscribe? That's because MailChimp is being used by so many savvy people. Get in there and use MailChimp.com. Thank you at MailChimp on Twitter, at MailChimp. Okay, let's get back to the program. Thanks, MailChimp.
Now, building great brands, something you've done over your career when you were building hotels, and you've written a lot about it and the sort of emotional nature of brands. What do you think is critical building brands today?
It's first and foremost, it's about, this is such an overused word, but it's about being authentic. But when I say authentic, what I mean is it's not authentic defined by your marketing department or your PR agency. It's authentic in terms of if you had to lose a fortune, but you would stand by that belief system, that's authentic. Authentic has nothing to do with the marketing or PR department. It has everything to do with what you would lose if you took the wrong bet that everybody said, what a fucking fool. That was a terrible idea. And that's what authentic is. It's when you're doing something that seems incredibly wrong from traditional business perspective. I went to Stanford Business School. It's the thing that the Stanford Business School professor would say, you don't take that path. And that's what's, it's true in people. You appreciate it in people. I mean, what's true of a company is true of a person. In your best friends, you may actually get tired of a friend who has an authentic personality and it grates on you. But at the end of the day, when you're at their memorial service and they've passed away, it's what you remember. And that's the relationship we have with brands at this point. Is there's too much distraction out there for you to be a mediocre brand. You got to basically stake your claim on what you are, and then there's a certain collection of people that will like a bee to a hive, hang out with you.
The 1,000 true fan theory, I guess.
Yeah.
And so, what is the role of PR marketing in this new world where, like, the brand stands for what it is at its truest core, what the founder believes? So, in the case of Airbnb,
can I say what I really believe?
Of course. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm a marketing person by nature, so I like marketing, and I like marketing people. And I'm not saying we should get rid of our marketing departments. But in the world we live in today, other than marketing people being really strategically minded and using the resources we have in social media and other forms, the marketing department has almost no role. The role is in how you deliver the product and how you create something that creates evangelists, and then how you create means for the evangelists to spread the word. And it's that simple. So if the marketing and PR team helps to support that, great. If they're doing anything else, they frankly are a distraction and can create to some inauthenticity.
The first hotel I stayed in ever in San Francisco when I was broke and a columnist was the Phoenix, which you couldn't, just when you were talking about marketing, if you stayed there, you couldn't help but tell 2 or 3 friends about where you had stayed.
But back then, in 1980, you were there in 1983, 92 or something like that?
92, 93, yeah.
Started in 87. I mean, back then we didn't have cell phones. The way you told a friend was you might use...
Over dinner, yeah.
Over dinner, yeah. So it was a whole different world.
But what was it about what you were doing there that, and what you believe in terms of marketing and building brands that makes it spread, and maybe how it's changed a little bit?
Well, the organizing principle we used for that first hotel, and really my last hotel I'm doing for Joie de Vivre is a hotel in downtown Palo Alto at Hamilton and Emerson, across the street from Peninsula Creamery. It's an 8-story building called Casa Olga that all these old people used to live, and it'll be called the Epiphany, and it opens in about 2 months.
Downtown Palo Alto, known for its boutique hotels.
Yeah, I mean downtown Palo Alto has like 2 hotels. That's it, and this will be the 3rd, and it'll be the nicest, I guess, or the most interesting for sure. This is the 52nd hotel, and every single time we create a hotel, it's based upon a magazine and 5 adjectives.
Sorry, wait. The hotel's based on a magazine.
Every single one. The first hotel, Dave said it. The first hotel, the Phoenix, which I knew had to. If you buy a motel, I mean, you're 26 years old. I was 26 years old, I had no money. I'm from like a middle-class family. We didn't have any money. And I went out and raised some money for my college classmates and my business school classmates, $1.1 million. And that was enough to buy the hotel, renovate the hotel, and have startup capital to open up. I mean, $1.1 million in San Francisco today will get you a studio condo. I mean, so yeah. I bought a motel on an acre of land in the Tenderloin. The neighborhood's no better than it used to be. And so how do you attract people to a 1950s motel that was already past its prime in 1987? And so we came up with a magazine, Rolling Stone magazine. We knew that rock and roll bands, the Marriott and Hilton didn't want them. So we said, let's come up with a magazine that defines the hotel. And we decided Rolling Stone defined the hotel. We came up with 5 adjectives that defined Rolling Stone as a magazine: funky, irreverent, adventurous, cool, and young at heart. And everything we did in creating that first boutique hotel, which was really a boutique motel. I was a motelier before I was a hotelier. That motel was, everything had to be either funky, irreverent, adventurous, cool, and young at heart, including the staff we hired. And when we opened, the place had a soul. You agreed, it had a soul, it had a personality. It was not for everyone, for sure. My mother is not funky, irreverent, or adventurous. But what we saw quickly is that the people who fell in love with the hotel fell in love with it because of their psychographics, not because of their demographics. And this is back in the age when I was talking about psychographics and like, people were looking at me like, what's wrong with you? Psychographics, no one knew what that meant like 25 years ago. But that's what I used as my means of getting clear on who our hotel guest was. And what we found out over time was the person who fell in love with the hotel were people who would use those 5 adjectives to describe themselves. So what we were really creating was not a lodging experience, it was an identity refreshment. So the identity refreshment was someone comes to the Phoenix and they feel like, wow, checking out 3 days later, I felt more funky, irreverent, or adventurous. And for a certain fraction of the population, that was the differentiator.
And so what will the magazine that inspires the Downtown Palo Alto Hotel be?
Well, Downtown Palo Alto Hotel, so we're doing it with IDEO. The last hotel we're doing with IDEO has helped concept this. And we came up with 12 magazines, so I can't give you one magazine or even 2. But I will say that the 5 adjectives are curious, entrepreneurial, in the know. Shoot, I can't remember the last 2. But curious, entrepreneurial, in the know, and 2 other words, 2 other adjectives. But the intent is basically to define, the hotel will define Palo Alto and define what the era we're living through is, and be the kind of place where a person goes there and feels like, wow, this place feels like my perfect habitat. And I actually think this is not just, I think boutique hotels are an intimate product choice. You live with the product, you get naked with the product, you shower with the product, you stay there 4 days. It's a lot more than, say, a restaurant, for sure. But I think that's true of products today. You know, products are a reflection of how you see yourself. And so thinking in that magazine metaphor is not a bad way for any company to think about when you're creating your product.
Product space has gotten violently competitive. People have become extremely good at making product. I mean, the products that come out of accelerators or incubators today look better than the products that had $2 or $3 million invested in them, 15 years ago. What do you think, on a product basis, gives people the edge today?
I think what gives people the edge today is, for those of you who know it, I'm like a complete Abraham Maslow nut. I think you know who he is. If you don't, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, iconic.
Shelter, affiliation.
Well, the base of the pyramid is
food.
Physiological needs, safety, social belonging needs, esteem, and then self-actualization. The companies that get it right get the base of the pyramid right, and then they go for the self-actualization. So, Ben at Pinterest used my last book was called Emotional Equations. The book before that was called Peak, and that was the book about Maslow. And he used that book. I gave a talk at Pinterest on Monday, and he just said to me a few weeks ago, I'd never met the guy, and he came up to me, and he's sort of famous, and I'm not that famous, and he came up to me and said, "Thank you." And I said, "Why?" He said, "I used your book Peak to start this company." Wow. And so then he asked me to speak there this Monday. So Pinterest, as a company, is addressing these unrecognized needs of customers, the self-actualizing needs of customers at the top of the pyramid. Airbnb is doing that. How is Airbnb doing it? It's doing it based upon giving a person the sense that they can belong anywhere. Wherever you go, you feel like you belong there, you can live like a local. It's not about just the mattress and the cleanliness. Part of my job in terms of why they hired me is because one of the Airbnb's big risks is that you have to have a minimum level of consistency for people in the broader population, beyond young tech people who are the core audience, to actually say, yes, I'm going to try Airbnb. So, but once you get past the base of the pyramid, if you can get up to the higher part of the pyramid and the self-actualization and help people feel like they belong anywhere and feel like, wow, I went to Siena, Italy, and I felt like I was a local. That's it.
So instead of saving money on a couch, I'm getting to hang out with the person in Barcelona who not only did I rent their couch, but they took me to the cool bar where they hang out.
They taught me the cool bar. They know I'm interested in architecture, so they showed me some Gaudi. They know that I'm a total food fan, and so they took me off the Ramblas, and I went to this great restaurant and had a bocadillo experience. And they're my friend for life. I have a friend in Barcelona. I don't just have a hotel there. So that's part of where Airbnb is going. Before I even knew I was going to give a talk at Airbnb, I created a startup. So I have a startup. I'm one of you guys. I have 6 full-time employees. I'm funding them all. I have no revenue model at all. I have some ideas of what the revenue model is. It's called Fest 300. It's a website that is in public beta, and it will actually launch with the full website in March. It's a website of the 300 best festivals in the world. So in one of the, give me a minute here. Okay?
Yeah, no, keep going.
No, you weren't like getting antsy, but where's your alcohol?
I'm just having tea.
Come on, you should have some alcohol, right? No, maybe not.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
people don't want to see Jason.
You'll still have
ugly.
your tea. Okay, all right.
I have to play poker later. I feel there's a poker game going on.
Okay, so
I never drink and play poker.
So here's a story. So we live in an era where we're so attached to our way of communicating with people is in a digital format. And the more digital we get, the more ritual we need. The more digital we get, the more ritual we need. And the ultimate ritual of humankind going back thousands of years is our festivals. And this goes back thousands of years. Earlier this year, I was at a festival in India. Anybody ever been to Kumbh Mela? Any Indians in the room ever been to their own festival? No.
I see one.
I've been to your festival, so for the
wait. There's one back there.
Yeah, over there. Yes. So Kumbh Mela is 100 million people at a festival. Every 12 years, the Maha is 100 million people. Every 3 years, there's a 70 million. It's the largest festival in the world.
Slightly bigger than Burning Man.
Well, and I'm on the board of Burning Man. So I've been going to Burning Man for 15 years. And who knew Burning Man even had a fucking board? I mean, I'm on the board.
Must be a hell of a board meeting.
Yeah, it's a great board meeting.
Slightly different than all of our board meetings.
Pass me the bong. Burning Man's a serious organization, let me tell you. So here's the story. As we get more digital and we communicate through Facebook and iPhones and texts and Snapchat. Yeah. That sounds dirty. Yeah,
it actually is.
It is dirty. Yeah, that's true. It is true.
It's kind of the point.
That's the whole point of the thing,
exactly.
Right? So we want the interpersonal connection in person. So, and whether it's a music festival or a religious pilgrimage or an arts and cultural festival. So Fest 300 I launched it because, well, first of all, I just wanted to go to all the world's best festivals, and I wanted to come up with an annual list of the 300 best festivals in the world, which means I get to go to festivals and have VIP treatment. But beyond that, what I believed was there's an unrecognized need. People want to have a curator of their life. They want someone to help introduce them to remarkable experiences around the world, and the remarkable experiences can be defined by a guy named Emil Durkheim, who's a sociologist from 100 years ago, who coined the phrase collective effervescence. Collective effervescence is what happens when you go to and you do an experience. You might have it at a Super Bowl, you might have it at the Kentucky Derby, but generally I'm more focused on festivals at Burning Man, or how many people have been to Burning Man? A handful of you? Okay, a handful of you. So whether
I know Josh Stein and I went. We shared an RV.
Burning Man, or whether it's some of the festival, you have this experience where your ego and your own sense of separation from the world declines, and what comes in its place is this communal joy. And of course, I called my company Joie de Vivre 27 years ago. So the idea of joy and how you find joy in life is, to me, the ultimate human experience. And to actually find it in the form of festivals is part of the reason I started this site. So long story short is that site, we have to get the knowledge right and help people understand how to get to a festival. But if we get the site right and make it something that people want to experience, is we have to have the community piece, which is the social belonging need, and then the sense of the bucket list and matchmaking and how we help you find the festival that's transformative for you.
Now, joy is something you've written about in the books. Really a key factor in retention for employees. I mean, what we do is incredibly hard. Every day it can be drudgery. Most days are not, the high fives and the eye pills.
You're not cleaning toilets for a living. So that's
no,
or at least you haven't recently.
No, I have cleaned toilets, but not recently. You're right.
Okay,
yes.
so that's.
I was just thinking that was my first job, but I'm at my dad's bar.
Your dad's bar.
I was a porter.
Yeah, which is
cleaning up a bar in Brooklyn at 6 in the morning is not pretty. A bar's bathroom.
At what age?
Oof, I was 11 or 12.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. See, that's a formative.
Explains a lot.
Yeah, it does. So.
Anyway, back to joy.
Back to joy.
The joy of cleaning.
The joy of cleaning bathrooms. Well, and so when you have 3,500 employees and 1,500 of them clean toilets for a living, you better figure out how to create a sense of meaning in
well,
cleaning
how did you? And how can
you will
people?
never. So the best evidence of this is the number one variable for successful hospitals in the United States has nothing to do with location or the number of doctors or the kind of insurance programs they have. It's how happy are the nurses. That's the number one variable for successful hospitals in the U.S. And when they did a study of nurses, who is a nurse who has a sense of a job and who has a nurse who's a sense of a calling, it was one variable. The variable was, does a nurse love what they do because of all the tasks? No. Does a housekeeper in my hotels love cleaning toilets? No. Most companies get so fixated on tasks and they create boundaries around what a person does that a person gets bored pretty quickly. If you can create an environment where, as in a hospital, the nurse who loves what she does or he does as a nurse is when they feel like they're the patient advocate. And they move beyond the task, and they focus on the purpose and the impact. And so the companies that do a great job, this goes back to what I was saying about Airbnb, and I didn't finish, about Airbnb needs to do a better job. We've done a great job of saying, here's our purpose as a company. Now we need to do a great job of helping every single one of our 750 employees feel like I understand my impact on a daily basis on the overall purpose. And a housekeeper who feels that way knows that her job, almost always a woman in the hotel business, is to create a relationship with our guests and to make them feel at home and to create a relationship with their fellow employees. And ultimately, the number one thing you can do in most companies is to give a person a sense of impact is connect them to the customer.
Now,
have your customers come in and tell stories.
Oh, have the customers come in and
have your customers come in, have a monthly staff meeting, and have your customers come in and tell stories, and especially stories where they're actually profiling great profiles and courage of employees who did great things.
Now, do you think you can take the nurse who maybe doesn't have the higher sense of purpose and, transform them into somebody who does? Yeah. And is that the job of the entrepreneur? In other words, if this person has a sense of if this person is just not into it, is it my job to try to convince them that, working at my help desk company is critically important for them? Or do you just go on to the next employee and fire that one, or not hire them?
Well, you have to fire people for sure. So 50, this Epiphany in downtown Palo Alto, maybe my 52nd hotel. Of the 52 hotels, only 7 of them were not hotels when we took them over. So 45 of them were hotels that we took over. 21 of them were union hotels. And I'm nothing against unions, but you take over a unionized staff who's been there a long time, and you're going to do a major retrofit and repackage it. How do you get the staff motivated and excited?
Is it possible?
It's absolutely possible. The Wall Street Journal did a profile on our Carlton Hotel, Hotel Carlton in San Francisco, which Dianne Feinstein owns. It hadn't been renovated in 20 years. It had been through, the staff hated the place. It joined the company at the lowest employee satisfaction, lowest customer satisfaction. Within 2 years after renovating it and completely changing the dynamic, it was the lowest price hotel in our company and had the highest customer satisfaction and had the second highest employee satisfaction.
And how do you
do
those
it?
Employees? Yeah.
You do it by first listening, helping. The first thing you do, again, we're sort of manual labor in our company. So you clean up the employee break room, and you paint it, and you do a picnic with all of the staff and their families, and you sit down with every single employee and you say, what do you think we should do here? And first they're stone-faced, and they think that this is a trick question, because I've worked here 22 years, and someone starts crying when he's talking to me, and no one's ever asked me that. No one's ever asked me what we should do here. So how engaged are you? And I had to explain what even the word engaged meant to the guy. And he said, no one cares if I'm engaged. So my union cares if I'm engaged, but the way they care if I'm engaged is if I show up. That's my definition of engaged. So I show up, and I do my 8 hours. That's what we inherited there. And that's what we've inherited 21 different times taking over union hotels. And what we've learned every single time is the first thing you do is you listen. The second thing you do is you make some tangible progress in what matters to them. And the third thing you do is you create a group goal. Continental Airlines did this. Continental Airlines was the absolute worst airline in the world.
Yeah, we all agree.
Worst. And then they turned it around. And they turned it around partly because the third thing they did was they created a goal that the whole company, all 40,000 Continental Airline employees, could actually have an impact on, which was on-time performance. Not everybody could do it, but most people could. And they had bonuses around that, and they educated on a monthly basis how people were doing. There's a great book called The Progress Principle, written by 2 Harvard Business School professors, that basically says, it was written last year, and it basically says the number one thing that people want to know in their work is, am I making progress? Not just in terms of recognition from their boss, but internally, intrinsically for themselves. Highly recommend that book, The Progress Principle.
Most companies here, most founders here, CEOs, management teams, they're going to be up on some of these management techniques of like soliciting feedback and making people part of the process. Probably one of the problems they face is maybe people having an expectation that they have too much of a say sometimes, and maybe being a little sour when, hey.
Entitled?
Well, okay, this is one word for it.
Yeah.
But sure, there's totally a sense of entitlement. I don't think anybody would disagree with that, which is probably not a bad thing overall. Or is it a bad thing? What do you think?
It's a bad thing. I think entitlement, it's one thing to feel engaged, it's another thing to feel entitled.
What's the difference?
The difference is, and I've never said this before, so I'm working on this on stage for the first time. I think if you're engaged, you feel you have an investment in something and a responsibility attached to it. And I think when you're entitled, you don't necessarily feel the responsibility. You feel that you've paid your dues, and the company has a responsibility to you. And it's not that covenant or contract that's sort of mutual.
The one's kind of egocentric and one's kind of about the clients and the product and the team.
Yeah. So.
And so how do you think you deal with that? Because that's something that is coming up frequently at startups, which is,
it's hard.
I can leave and I can go get a job at Google. I can go get a job at Facebook. I don't need to deal with this. If you're not going to do what I want to do, and you're not going to listen to me being translated as, I want to have it my way. You can't let everybody have it their way. How do you deal with that, do you think?
Well, obviously the practical question is, how important is this person to the organization? And
Sure.
that affects how you respond. But if I hear someone say that to me, my first response is, there's the door.
No.
Leave. You have every right to leave. You don't have to be here. I'm paying you, and we have a mutual relationship. I pay you for the work that you're doing, but you're welcome to leave. Usually, you don't get into it. If you're running your company the right way, you don't get to a situation where a person feels like they have to sort of lay it out on the line like that. But here's where entitlement's challenging. First of all, what I see, and again, I'll say it to Airbnb right now. If you have people working 80 hours a week, and they have a sense they have some stock options, but they have no clue what those stock options are worth, and they're doing it because it's primarily a financial calculation in their mind, but you don't have tangibles that allow them to understand what that means, you have just created what I call an emotional equation, which is my last book called Emotional Equations, of anxiety. Anxiety equals uncertainty times powerlessness. And when you have stock in something,
anxiety
equals uncertainty times powerlessness. Those are the two primary variables that lead to anxiety.
So I don't know what my Zynga stock's going to be.
Anxiety equals
Facebook,
what you don't know and what you can't control.
And you have no control over those two stocks, and they both got creamed, creating massive anxiety.
So the key thing for someone who's in a company like that, and part of the reason people end up getting entitled for other things, is because they have no clue what their stock's worth. They have no clue what the liquidity plan's going to be, and they feel really out of the loop on that. And it's a hard thing for a founder and the investors to talk through, but there's some level of the more, my personal opinion is the more transparency you have on some level, the more you reduce the anxiety. If you reduce the anxiety, you typically reduce the entitlement. Because a lot of times what people are doing in an entitled way is they're saying, listen, I'm working 80 hours a week. I have no idea what these stock options are worth. You're paying me at best 50th percentile, at best. And so I need something tangible that tells me that I'm not a fucking idiot. And
that's where that attention comes in.
And that's where the entitlement comes in, and that's where because you're going to continue to slave drive me because that's the nature of the culture. You're the CEO, and you're working 100 hours a week, and so I've got to work 80 hours a week. So how do you solve that? So you solve it, I think, a little bit by starting to, and this is where a venture capital firm is really a partner here. You start creating some level of clarity about what the liquidity plan is for the company. And even if it's 3 or 4 or 5 years from now, and if there's no financial model right now that sort of defines where it's going to be, at least you help people to understand that they're in the know. They're in the group that actually understands what's happening. And if you have some sense of that, first of all, you trust your leadership and your investors a lot more. And trust is a real fundamental in business, for sure. Secondly, you can make good, rational decisions as a result. I mean, you have to be very cautious about trying to peg the value of what people's stock options are worth. That's risky, but there's some value in it if you get good advice about what you can do. But more than anything, helping people have some level of power.
The secondary market, in a way, is a major change in this wave of internet companies. The fact that you can
different than the last time.
Yeah, the fact you have some power to get some liquidity at some point, even without the permission of the company. I mean, that's a good thing in your mind, or?
Yeah, I think it's good. I mean, there's a lot of people. There are a lot of people in startups where a founder says, "We're not going to go IPO for a long time or never."
Well, that's always bullshit anyway.
Well, I don't know if it's not always bullshit.
When's the last time it happened that a really successful company did an IPO?
I don't know. I mean,
that's because it hasn't. I mean, it literally hasn't happened, right? I mean,
I don't know.
Zuckerberg said for
SurveyMonkey.
All right, that was a private equity company that's not going to go public, but I'd love to buy shares.
He married into the right family, so.
No, I could see, sir, but I mean, it's definitely going to go public at some point. I mean, come on. The private equity guys are not investing in it because it's not. So, I mean, it's going to go public at some point. That's just window dressing.
There are companies, Tom's Shoes. So Blake McCoskey, who's a friend of mine, but he didn't take any money. So Tom's Shoes is a very profitable, very successful company. and he's never going to go public. But he doesn't have any outside money. So that's part of the influence, for sure. Because there has to be a liquidity.
Let's go through some of these equations, because they're pretty good.
Oh, really?
Disappointment.
Disappointment equals expectations minus reality. Right? I mean, yeah.
That pretty much hits pretty...
So how does that relate to... that's why I was hired at Airbnb. You know, expectations, you have hosts in all these countries who have never been given any training formally about the art and science of hospitality. Expectations here, reality could be here, disappointment's the difference.
So you're trying to close the gap.
We try to close the gap and frankly get the reality above expectations, and then you have delight. How that relates to entrepreneurs is how are you educating, Draper about where you are? And I don't know too many venture capitalists or private equity people out there who love surprises.
You're talking about with the relationship with your investors.
Yeah. So I think helping people to understand, as the entrepreneur, helping your investors understand where you're going through. It's really easy to get into this place where I don't want them to know how difficult the situation is because they might replace me or they may actually come down hard. Generally speaking, most investors I know actually say the reason we need to replace the entrepreneur is they have no clue how far off path they are. And so
they're in denial, yeah.
They're in denial, and they also haven't done a great job of communicating. So communicate, and if that means ratcheting down expectations in the short term, that's a good thing.
Regret equals?
Regret equals disappointment plus a sense of responsibility. Regret is a modern emotion. It's when people have some level of control. Regret, from an investor perspective, is when you had disappointment plus the responsibility. You had a chance to invest in something, and you chose not to, and that Airbnb being a good example. And you should have invested because it's worth a lot more now. Mark Twain said it best, and he said something, and I can't get the quote, but he basically said, at the end of your life, you're going to regret more about what you didn't do than about what you did do and made the mistake on. That's not his quote, but that's sort of paraphrasing it. So what it says is, stick your neck out. There's a lot of people, there's a lot of behavioral economics and behavioral science and psychology around investing, about how people don't want regret, and this is part of the reason why they anchor to certain things, to certain prices on things. Long story short is, regret's a phenomenally important emotion.
What do you regret about your career?
What do I regret about my career? That I created for those in the Bay Area, you'll understand this metaphor, a Winchester mystery house of a capital structure, which meant that I started my first hotel with a set of 14 investors who put in $1.1 million. And then I did my second hotel with another set of investors. And I did that my whole career. The management company and the brand I owned by myself with my top 3 investors, top 3 employees, top 3 managers, leaders in the company. But every single hotel was a different capital structure and a different set of investors. So every time we went through a dot-com bust or a Great Recession, I was up 24 hours a day trying to make sure everybody was okay. And that collection of investors there think that I'm putting too much time in this hotel over there. And it was a capital structure that was awful. And it's part
Why do you think you made that mistake?
I made the mistake because I thought it gave me freedom because no one investor group had control over me. But at the end, they all had control over me.
So it was a huge mistake.
It was a huge mistake. It allowed me to grow a bigger company in terms of having 52 hotels. That's a lot of hotels. And because one set of investors they like that kind of hotel, they would never invest in this kind of hotel. So I'll go find the investors for this kind of a hotel. The good news is that no lawsuits. Generally, if you look at the track record, people made a ton of money.
You seem like you're at peace with it. What's the secret when you make a huge, colossal mistake like that to not being bitter about it?
The reason I'm at peace with it because ultimately, first of all,
are you at peace with it? You may not be. It took me 30 minutes, but I got there.
No,
are you at peace with
I'm at peace with the fact that it's behind. I have a regret around it. I absolutely have a regret around it. What I'm at peace with is that I've gotten myself to a place in my life where I'm not going to sleep freaked out about, am I going to get a call? I got calls back in 2009 the wives of the investors, happened twice. The one time I'll tell you that's just phenomenal. So at midnight I get a call at home. So nobody has my home number. So I got up, and I get the call, and there's a woman on the phone, and she's screaming at me, and she's actually quite drunk. And she's telling me that she has 3 kids in private schools, and she's not going to be able to keep them in private schools because we're doing an awful job of managing her husband's hotel. And if I don't get my act together, she's going to figure out how to eliminate me one way or the other.
So just your basic midnight drunken death threat.
So yeah.
Pretty standard. Who hasn't had those?
That kind of capital structure kept me up late at night a lot. And I don't have that anymore. Am I as rich as I would have been if I'd created a capital structure and had one investor and we would just sort of kept it going? No, probably would have been better. They would have required an ownership in the management company, and ultimately I sold
How do you deal as an entrepreneur with those, since we're getting into the sort of on a zone?
We're going way beyond our time, too, but that's okay.
But this is getting interesting now.
Okay.
The sort of jealousy / regret / bitterness, I mean, when you see what's going on in the world, and sometimes you see, like we did in Web 1.0, people who didn't work very hard get an incredible payday, and then others, who worked incredibly hard and had a better product just totally hit the wall. And there's a lot of randomness to life. And
there's
how
a
do
lot
you
of
think
randomness to life, yes, for sure.
An entrepreneur can, maintain, a tranquility or peacefulness to stay focused on their business when maybe life isn't always fair? Or how are viewed?
For me, there's some people in life who are transactional. The best leaders are either transactional or they're transformational. And I tried to, and what does that mean? A transactional person so Warren Buffett as an investor is a transformational investor in the sense that he looks at the long term. And so when it came to the relationships we had as investors in hotels that we would create, I learned the hard way, better to invest with transformational investors who have a long-term perspective on things. If they're transactional and we have a speed bump, it may mean the speed bump leads them to saying, let's just get rid of this and move on.
So for entrepreneurs.
And for entrepreneurs, so you look at who your investors are in terms of are they short-term or long-term oriented. And I looked at my senior team. And as someone, I would ask questions, interview questions that would get to this. Is this person doing this because their primary reason of joining us is because in the next 3 to 5 years they want to get rich? And if that's their primary reason, I don't want to hire them. And it meant in a couple cases, I had someone leave who probably would have been a really remarkable leader in the company. But what I got was, if their primary reason, and the questions I would ask would sort of get me there. If the primary reason they were actually joining us is because they think they're going to get rich off this company, if we have a speed bump as a company, they're gone. There's another opportunity. And I really wanted them first and foremost to believe in either the culture of the company, the management team, and loving working with us, or the purpose of the company. That had to be paramount. Getting rich had to be second. And I'm not saying that that's the right way to do it, but I will say that in the .com bust, when we were by far the largest hotelier in the Bay Area, we had 21 hotels in the Bay Area, we had nothing outside the Bay Area. Between 2001 and 2006, the Bay Area experienced the largest percentage revenue drop in the history of American hotels since World War II, and that's all where our hotels were. We lost not one of our top 15 executives. Partly because our competitors were going bankrupt and foreclosures, they were not doing well, and we were doing better than them. But
it was a brutal time for you.
It was a terrible time. And
did you think of quitting during that time?
I was a gladiator during that time. I absolutely wanted to succeed. I wanted to use this Maslow's hierarchy of needs thing to help us succeed.
So you never thought about quitting?
No, not at all. During the last downturn, during the Great Recession,
crushed your mind?
I wanted to jump off the Golden Gate Bridge. True. No, I'm
literally suicidal.
Yeah. No,
or are you being metaphorical?
No, I had 5 friends. So I have a friend named Chip, and he was our insurance broker, and he was one of my closest friends, and he committed suicide. And he did it at a time when I was asking advice from him. thinking my problems were bigger than his problems. And he was giving me great advice. And then he lived half-time in the Bay Area, half-time with his family with his wife and kids in New Zealand. And he committed suicide. And he was one of the first of 5 friends of mine who committed suicide, 3 of whom were entrepreneurs between 2008 and 2010. A couple from Stanford, a couple people of them were friends of mine from Stanford. Long story short is, I learned from that lesson, and then I had an experience where I broke my ankle playing baseball, got a bacterial infection in my leg. Had a septic leg, and then I was giving a speech in St. Louis, and I went flatline on stage. At age 47, I died. I literally died on stage. And I died because I had some kind of probably allergic reaction to the antibiotics I was on. But it was August of 2008, and the world was falling apart. If you remember the summer of 2008, this is a month.
Seems like forever now.
Yeah, it was a month before Lehman Brothers went bankrupt, and it was just awful. And the hotel business feels it faster than most other businesses.
Instantly.
Yeah, we're like the canary in the coal mine. So I could just see I could see how bad it was going to get. All my friends were saying, "Oh, this won't be so bad. After the election, it'll get better." I was like, "Oh yeah, right." No, it got a lot worse. But I had my flatline experience, and they brought me back to life. I went flatline 9 times, and that moment was when I said, "I don't want to be CEO. I've been CEO of this company for 22 years now. I need to get myself out of here." So what I will say is that being an entrepreneur can kill you. You may not jump off a bridge. You may not actually have a flatline experience, but it can kill your spirit. That's not why I'm sitting here today. That's not why the company had me come sit here. But the point of that is this. You can either have a job, a career, or a calling. Sign up for the last one. If you don't feel the sense of calling in what you're doing, and I felt a calling for 22 years until the anesthetic wore off, and then it became a career and a job really quickly. And if that happens in the worst of times, that's when you need to say to your investors, you no longer should be the CEO of your company. And that's a really hard thing to say. And I didn't have to say that to my investors because it was my management company, the brand and the management company. I owned 85% of it. My investors were my top 3 people in the company. But we had 38 hotels we were managing at that point. 17 of those hotels we owned with partners. And we're going through the biggest downturn since the Depression. And I had to say to myself and to my company, I'm not the right person to be leading this company anymore. And I thought I'd be doing it until I was 75. But I had to have a flatline experience to wake me up. So for those in the room, and some of the entrepreneurs in the room here today are having a hard time sleeping. You are occasionally talking about your company a little too much with your friends, or your wife, or husband, or spouse, or significant other. All I can say is, if you get into a paradigm of your relationship with your work where your sense of who you are is so wrapped up in your work, and you can't have any perspective about it beyond that, you need therapy. You need something to give you some perspective. You need a coach. You need an investor who can actually be a coach. You need someone to give you the ability to step away a little bit, because if you've gotten that far into it, you no longer have the observation quality about your business to be able to see it for what it is. And that's
people
what we need.
are generally faking it. I mean, people put on a good face that everything's getting, they're crushing it all the time. But just by a show of hands, entrepreneurs in the room, how many people had an absolutely perfectly awesome last week as an entrepreneur? How many people last week was like perfect and amazing? Okay, well, 5 of you, go fuck yourselves. Okay. How many of you had like a really difficult week last week, and I'm going to include myself in it? How many people had a challenging week last week? Raise your hand. And where's the other third of the people in the room? Somewhere in between, or just too embarrassed to say? I mean, most people, like there's 5 people out of 125 entrepreneurs here who had a good week last week.
The reason organizations like YPO exist, and there's EO, and there's all this, is because you're as sick as your secrets. And you're as sick as your secrets. And the people the CEOs of, so many of the people in my YPO chapter were entrepreneurs, and they couldn't admit to their investors or to their spouses or to their employees how they were feeling. And you thought you joined YPO because it was a place where you go and talk about your business strategy. At the end of the day, you go to YPO because you need some emotional support. And so, so what's the point of that? The point is, if the bigger the disconnect between what you really are feeling and what you're showing to the world, that's the risk of your life. And that's the risk of your life. And for many people, that's a risk worth taking. And for others, it's a risk that ultimately takes a toll that's, that is their life.
Is it worth it at the end of the day?
What's worth it is, I have two quotes that come to mind on that. Henry David Thoreau said, "The cost of something is measured by how much life you have to give for it." So this is part of the reason I never ran for mayor of San Francisco. Because I got to know Gavin Newsom pretty well. I knew him way before he was mayor, and it was awful. It was a terrible life he lived. He had to leave. And so in that case, I said no, but I think being an entrepreneur, creating a great product, creating a great company, creating an environment where you have enlivened your customers and your employees, that can be worth it. But the better quote, and the one that I love to think about all the time, is by a guy named Khalil Gibran, who wrote a book called The Prophet. That's P-H-E-T, not F-I-T. The Prophet, and he said, "Work is love made visible." Work is love made visible. And to me, the entrepreneurs I most admire, Herb Kelleher, who was a co-founder of Southwest Airlines and CEO for 37 years of Southwest, a terrible industry, but an amazing company. Work is love made visible. You have the opportunity as an entrepreneur to create something that absolutely embodies your legacy and something you're going to leave. Yes, you get into the financial side of what you're going to leave to your children, your spouse, whomever, your alma mater. But the more important legacy is not the financial one. It's the cultural one. It's the experience one. It's how you impact other people. And to me, that's what has always. There's 150 people who were in Joie de Vivre in my company 150, who have either started their own restaurant, spa, hotel, consulting company, etc. And if you're creating an incubator for entrepreneurs, that's the ultimate legacy, I think, as an entrepreneur.
All right, let's hear it for Chip Conley. Okay. And I think we have time for 2 questions. No questions? Oh, come on, let him ask 2. 2 questions.
I think we went way too long.
It doesn't matter. I mean, we're just going to play cards on this. Anybody have any questions?
No questions. Oh, there's a question.
There's always a question or 2. This got kind of deep at the end.
Kind of deep, yeah.
So I used Airbnb exclusively on my last trip to Paris and Dubai.
Paris and Dubai, okay.
Yeah, and just want to give you a scorecard.
Feedback.
A scorecard, yeah.
Scorecard.
So I booked 4 apartments. 1 exceed my expectation, 1 meet the expectation, and the other 2, 1 is below expectation. So my question is.
What about the fourth one?
By the way, that was my first time using Airbnb, and it won't be the last time, and I'm hooked on it. So just want to let you know.
And you don't fit the demographic because the demographic generally is people 35 and younger, but
yeah.
Thank you. Well, maybe you're 35. I'm sorry. Yeah. That was.
You're really old. You're not our customer, but thanks anyway.
I'm not that old. That old. But
I think you're younger than me, but that's okay.
But it's a good deal. So the question is, what are some of the things that you're going to do to align the expectation of the
how you
guests?
align
So let me just say, there's a long answer to that, and it's an amazing, interesting, fascinating thing. But the short answer is this. Fundamentally, base of the pyramid, standards. There's 9 standards every single host around the world, 500,000 of them have to meet. There's 9 of them. We're educating them. Last week we announced what they are. We're educating around them. We're going to actually help them get better at them. And if they don't do it, we'll enforce and they'll be off the site. So that's the basic. stuff. The other thing that we're going to do that I'm very excited about, the opportunity for Airbnb that's most exciting to me, I want us to be better than Netflix or Amazon in the following way. Think about this. Airbnb has 500,000 listings around the world. We'll have 1 million a year from now. The most diverse collection of choices. 70% of our guests and hosts review the experience they had. And we have the ability to ask them, what do you like? The best thing we could do is to curate your life, but especially your travel life. So from the time you leave your home to the time you come home, we can ensure in choosing who your investors are that there's a common overall vision of where you're going. And I learned the hard way with some of my investors on one particular project that I did, which was a really transformative hospitality project, a luxury campground, which is an oxymoron. We did not have a transformationally minded investor. We had a short-term minded investor, and it was a mistake. But if you start at the right place where you have the same vision, then it's all about mapping to the vision. And the investors who get it right are making sure that your map to the vision is still on path, or if it's gone off path, that they understand where you're going. And so, yes, if the investors actually think you're off path and completely lost in terms of getting to that vision, or that overall purpose and vision has changed, you have to have a fundamental question, a fundamental conversation that says, okay, where are we? So, in so many cases, it's a personality issue, though. Have they lost trust in you? And if they've lost trust in you, it doesn't matter what the vision is, because actually they're going to want somebody else to take them to the vision.
Okay, one more time for Chip.
So.